Hey, I'm Sarah Tegander, international speaker and trainer for a $40 million division in healthcare. With over a decade of experience working with healthcare providers, I believe that a healthcare practice should do more than just pay back student loans. Each week, I'll bring you the tips, tricks, and experts you need to build your practice both on and offline. Smart people take notes, so grab a pen or open up the Notes app on your phone as we dive into the Health of Your Business podcast. When you have a practice, you want it to be memorable and you want it to be something that people can easily refer to. And there's a lot of audiologists out there, okay? Cardiologists, dermatologists, all of the ologists, right? And you stand out. You're different. That's because you're a podcast listener of the Health of Your Business podcast. But I know you're different anyways. And I know that you have your own unique framework. You have a way that you approach medicine in such a different way. And I want you to let's think about something else like a gym. And there's all different types of gyms, right? And a CrossFit gym is very different than a gym that teaches bar classes, for instance. That's their unique framework. And that's how you describe what the gym is like to someone else. That's how you tell them why it's different, why the class setup is different, how the instructors are different. If you, as a practitioner, can figure out how to have a unique framework for your practice, it is going to be so much easier for the right patients to come in through your doors and for you to get those aligned referrals that I know that you're looking for. I can't think of anyone better than Dr. Sam Shea to help explain how to think about frameworks for your practice. With his own health journey and his own frameworks that's helped explode his functional medicine practice himself, he is so generous with his time in showing all about frameworks. And I say showing because if you really want an added bonus, I want you to go over to YouTube where you can watch this visual interview. It actually more was a whole lecture from Dr. Shea. Again, he was so generous with his time. I want you to go there so you can see his slides, you can see his generosity, you can follow along, and then come back to us in the Facebook group and let us know if you have questions about the framework or if you have an idea for a framework and you want us to work it out with you. We'd love to do that, but let's go in and we're going to start with Dr. Sam Shea's story. Dr. Sam Shea, I need you in my life. So like really you coming on this podcast is helping me just show up and work so much more for my clients. So I think we go down like a ton of rabbit holes because, everyone just heard that you are like all the things that you're certified in and an amazing practitioner you are. So I want to just start on that end because I want to give a little bit of accolades to your framework, which is the 10 pillars of health and functional testing. How long did it take you to make that? You were just born, right? You were born and your first words were mama and then 10 pillars of health.
Almost. Was, I went through the practicum. Of what the 10 pillars of health is a framework that I put together to capture all the meaningful aspects of people's lifestyle in order to figure out what went wrong, when, and why, and then prioritize what pillar needs to be worked on first in order to get people better as quickly as possible. So the practicum, in all seriousness, is was a very sick child, starting at age 6 with my parents' nuclear divorce. And me and my sisters were in the fallout of, in the blast radius of that. And the fallout from that divorce was developing all sorts of issues: eating disorder, sugar addiction, video game addiction, terrible digestive issues, high stress, anxiety, depression. Going through school also was intellectually very rigorous, but also emotionally and physically violent. And being a small, undernourished, sickly, sleep deprived, hyper insomniac child, I was a visible, easy target. So there was a war zone emotionally at home, and then a war zone emotionally and physically at school, led to about 12 years or so of just not being well and on all levels, but nothing with some overt pathological diagnosis from Western standards. And both my parents being medical doctors, they knew, in the 80s, they knew nothing about natural health. And I was put on like a low fat, high carb diet at age 7 because my cholesterol at age 7 was checked. And I was put on a low fat, high carb diet, which turns out genetically was the worst thing possible for me. Because I know now, based on the genetics testing that I do, I actually have the second lowest carb tolerance you can have genetically. I basically have the carb tolerance of an Eskimo, and which makes sense because my heritage is Northern Russian, which is up near there's snow and not a lot of fruit all the time, so it makes sense. And what I had to do in terms of the practical with the 10 pillars is I went through all 10 pillars of health, and all 10 of my pillars had crumbled to a meaningful degree. Some were sledgehammered, and I the construct didn't develop until I was in chiropractic school, where I figured out there was a triangle of health from D.D. Palmer back in 1895, and that was just trauma, toxins, and thoughts. But you talk about today, people, we're going to help your trauma, toxins, and thoughts. It's a bit vague because things are more complicated now. And I was studying functional neurology at the time, so I put the brain smack in the center of the triangle, partly because it's more accurate. Well, first off, the triangle, I removed it as a triangle and put it as a Venn diagrams, like 3 intersecting circles, because all those things intersect. But right in the middle is the brain, because arguably the brain is the epicenter. And if you want to pick a piece of anatomy, let's pick the hypothalamus, which is almost the literal anatomical center of the brain, and pretty much the center of the brain in terms of decision making, because it takes in physical inputs, chemical inputs, and emotional inputs, and is the boardroom. The hypothalamus is the boardroom to decide, are we in danger or not? Are we going to have a stress response or not? Or are we going to engage in long-term health, healing, growth, and repair? So it was brain, physical, chemical, emotional. And then I realized, you know what? I need to split each corner of the triangle into 3 parts. So, and that's where the 10 pillars came from: the brain in the center, and then the physical broken into 3, the biochemical broken into 3. And then, I can even show you, like, I have a quick,
and for our podcasters, this is a benefit of joining the Facebook group, because you can come and find Dr. Shea right here now, showing us exactly what he's doing. Please,
YouTube channel also. You'll get the benefits
of
seeing it there, of course, and hit that flag button to get notifications.
Likes are my tip jar.
Exactly. Right. So this is the triangle of health, and then the just visually, just that they change that into the 3 intersecting circles, and then the brain in the middle, and then this kind of clumsy representation, like you go on Fiverr and you get other people to figure out, hey, here's a thing, try to make it look nice or whatever, or you do it on PowerPoint or whatnot,
or you download my opt-in, which is the 10 ways to work in your practice, not on your practice. And I will give you all the outsourcing sites, and I even write the job description for you. So that's on my website.
Excellent plug. Okay.
Whose podcast? Are you on my podcast or am I? I don't know. This is a big commercial break, I think.
Okay, right. Now back to our regular schedule of programming. So I split each corner into 3 parts. And so physical is bowel, body, and burst. So that's digestion, which is physical. The physical body, which is genetics, untreated injuries, bad dental work, poor posture, spinal misalignments, chronic pain. And burst is a B word for movement, because all my things begin with the B, and that's alliteration, which was one of the methods of frameworking. The toxins were split into 3 parts. Biochemical split into 3 parts: toxins, nutrients, and breakfast. Eating routines, morning and evening, as well as eating a solid breakfast. I know some of you will be thinking, well, wait a minute, what about intermittent fasting? Which is the question I get literally every single time. And I say, if you're going to skip something, don't skip breakfast, because then your cortisol levels will keep going up, 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 and up, because you need to break the fast to stop the cortisol response to keep fuel in your blood to keep your brain alive. Now, a lot of people love skipping breakfast because they get a lot of stuff done because they're riding on that cortisol high. And I'd say if you're going to skip a meal, skip either lunch or dinner. So you get the 12 to 16-hour fast. Now, for people who have families, skipping dinner is difficult because that's usually family time. One solution is that you have breakfast, lunch, and an early dinner, like 5 or 6 o'clock, if possible. That way, if your breakfast is at 7 in the morning, you still have a 12, 13-hour fast. You get the benefits of intermittent fasting without, if you don't have a late dinner. Or you can skip lunch and you'll get some 12-hour segment either between lunch and dinner or between breakfast and dinner, between dinner and breakfast. I really just, and you know, this it's a truism, but like who is promoting skipping breakfast? It's 20s to 40s financially solvent tech entrepreneur males. Those are the people, but I've worked with mostly fatigued, burnout moms and mompreneurs, and you're way more vulnerable to the vicissitudes of blood sugar dysregulation from skipping breakfast than males are, and that's just a hormonal reality.
And this is also with like knowing who you serve. So you bring up a really important thing because you can't be everyone to everyone, and the riches are in the niches. And so knowing who's walking through your office, because I work with another provider who the people that do walk through his office are more males. They tend to skew, they're not in the 20s to 40s, they're a little bit older, but he's getting a lot of former pro athletes. He's getting CEOs who are now looking at longevity and anti-aging. That's totally different though, you know, than what you're seeing. So I want to just ask the provider, like, take a minute mentally, and I like what you're saying is what you are learning, who's teaching that, and who are they teaching that to? Because if it's
Correct.
not your tribe, it's not going to work for your people.
It won't work. What will happen is that prescribing it rote will not work in every case. But the real clinician, so a clinician is a pragmatist, and that we observe and we have a bit of Zen in us because we were willing to give up our precious theories if what's presented before us isn't fitting into the theory. And the whole thing about breakfast is like, I do work with actually a lot of I mostly have female clients, but I do work with male entrepreneurs, whether they're like lawyer. I get along really well with lawyer clients because they like they ask super picayune questions, and I'm like, sure, here's a 5-paragraph essay to explain that, and then eventually they get frustrated because they run out of questions, that there's no 5-paragraph essay that's not there available to give them the answer to. Then they're like, fine, okay, great, let's like we get along on the good wavelengths, you know. So it's knowing even who's the niche within who you appeal to. Like my entrepreneurs I work best with are lawyers, engineers, software developers, high-end service providers, and ex-military, because they have a mindset that and a frame of thinking that I really get along with. And I also resonate really, 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 really strongly and get along really well with moms and mompreneurs, partly because my story was that I was raised by a very stressed out mompreneur who lived a very unhealthy lifestyle, and the knock-on effects really deeply and meaningfully affected me. And so to me, to pay it forward, I've gone out of my way to really help moms get more freedom, more time, more energy, less overwhelm, more resilience, you know, because if you help mom, you literally help the whole family. And what I provide clinically to moms, I would have given my left hand to be able to give to my mother when she was raising me. So, because the whole family would have been just exponentially healthier and happier, especially her. So it's okay to have more than one niche, but as long as those separate niches are true niches, you know, like as opposed to like a diffuse thing here. So that's where I focus. And the thing is, the 10 pillars of health actually applies to all of them because it's the same framework of analyzing where people are at with their lifestyle. And like the mental emotional slice of the pie here is bothers, which is stressors, whether it's marital stress, social stress, family stress, financial stress, cultural stress. Like I've moved to different parts of the country and even lived overseas for 8 years. Like it's culture shock is real. And even like the news, particularly as we're recording it, is like stressful to watch. Clutter is a stress. I mean, Marie Kondo is just killing it with the life-changing magic of tidying up, because clutter is a stress.
It is.
Electromagnetic fields, for some people, including me, we're sensitive to it. For the majority, they're not.
Right.
That's a stressor. Bugs is hidden infections, whether it's gut infections. When I lived in New Zealand, mold was like everywhere because we're a tiny little island surrounded by ocean on 4 sides with really crappy housing materials. And so mold was a huge, huge issue. Mold, for the segments of the population that are genetically vulnerable to it, will ruin your life. For others, it's like, oh yeah, it's annoying, but they don't get affected by it. And the last pillar, bedtime, is sleep. And consistency, duration, quality, and depth. So when I work with people, it's analyzing their brain and hormone system, adrenals, thyroid, sex hormone exposure, estrogen or progesterone imbalance. And of course, there's functional testing in all of these, whether it's a Dutch test or adrenal testing or whatever. Bowel, check for digestion, pooping, chewing, absorption. People spend all this money on expensive supplements and expensive food, but if they're not absorbing it, what's the point? So you run digestive tests, every major functional lab, thinks their poop test smells better. You can also check micronutrients, whether it's an ion panel from Genova, check for nutrient deficiencies. Physical body, I put genetics in here because, twins have identical bodies because of genetics.
Yeah.
So genetics fits all in here. Burst exercise, you check for, are they doing high intensity interval training safely? Are they walking? Are they moving? Exercise, to a lot of clients, is a dirty word because they feel a lot of guilt and shame. Like, I'm not exercising enough, but I say just do movement.
Right.
Let's figure out movement. Biotoxins, all sorts of functional tests you can run for toxic exposure. The big mistake most people make is they run to do an off-the-shelf detox and they're not ready to do it and they hurt themselves, like I did. I detoxed too quickly and that was bad, very bad. Bionutrients is all the things that you need to feel better, all the things you need for your body to grow, heal, repair, continue to thrive. So that's not just amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, etc. It's also sunlight and oxygen, because you metabolize those. You metabolize sunlight and oxygen just like water and minerals. Like, so that is included in bionutrients. Breakfast, we discussed, morning meal. My first ebook was on breakfast and adrenal health. And it's also routine. Some of the most unhealthy people I've ever worked with in my life have been night shift nurses. The single most unwell people as a group I've ever worked with have been night shift nurses, because they have all of these other 9 pillars crumbling. But the real monkey wrench is this crazy shift work schedule.
In general, it's so hard. And I mean, and you want to like say, do you use some exogenous melatonin or like, what do you add to that? But you don't want to get addicted to anything. Also, if what you know about genetics, how many people are coming to you because they have addictive personalities and they're attracted to you because you had an addictive, you were addicted to sugar and video games. And so you're attracting those people. And so there's not a whole lot that you can reach for them. Really just a new job application for them. Like, let's get some resume skills.
I would not wish nursing upon my worst enemy.
No.
It is such, and the tragedy is that like there's such giving, heart on sleeve, people that they just self-sacrifice. And
it tends to be moms too. I have so many friends who are moms and nurses, and they say, well, I want to spend time with my kids when they're awake and work while they're sleeping. And then you're just literally burning the candle at both ends. And that's not the way to show up as a mom at all.
Yeah, it's a real, there's so many things that can be done as for the nursing profession, like and that's a whole separate discussion. But there are meaningful strategies within my napping art. I think it was like the 4th article I ever wrote on my blog was on napping. I wrote it specifically because of a nursing patient. to like, this is how you strategically, meaningfully, and nap in a way that's going to be restorative, as opposed to just like this light little touch up. And that
I want
napping,
that ebook. I'm going to grab that. I
it's
love
it's just
naps.
it's a blog
Oh, it's
post.
a
I mean,
blog post. Okay, I'm going. I'm
it's like the
finding
fourth
it.
article. You have to like tick all the way back to the blog roll. But I'll spoil alert. We'll just share it here for people that are interested. There's a great book called The Promise of Sleep, written by, and this name is real, Dr. William Dement. That's his name.
Okay.
Dr. Dement. He's real. I think he's been doing sleep research for 60 years, if he hasn't retired already, out of Stanford. And he did this he's the one who named the 4 stages of sleep. Stage 1, 2, and he said in his book, like, if I knew that was going to be adopted as stage 1, 2, I would have picked a sexier sounding name than stage 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
So he's the one who discovered REM sleep. Like, you put electrodes on a cat, and their brain is more active when or more active when they're dreaming. And his paper was rejected by, I can't remember, like a dozen articles, because they thought he was faking the data, because they said it was impossible that a sleeping cat's brain could be that active. And now it's like one of the top 10 most cited research articles in all history of publication of all research articles ever. So really smart dude. And so he did this brilliant experiment. I mean, just it's genius. He had 4 groups. All of them were doing driving simulations. Okay. And so one group, no nap. Another group, 20-minute nap. Another third group, coffee, no nap. Fourth group drank the coffee first, then immediately took a 20-minute nap. Okay. The drink coffee first, then have a 20-minute nap did absolutely way higher than all the other groups, because what happened was that the caffeine takes about 20 minutes to kick in. So when you wake up from your nap, you don't have the sleep inertia from the nap, because the caffeine is kicked in.
My dad's been telling me this for years.
Yeah.
My dad's been telling me this, and that's what I do. I have a cup of coffee, and then I take a nap. I don't take a nap and then have a cup of coffee. Correct. I do it the other way around. I haven't told anyone. I know my dad said he must have read that study. My dad is, I didn't know that you grew up in a family of medical providers. My dad is a double board certified in OBGYN, obstetrics and gynecology, and lifestyle medicine. And my mom has a professional degree as an attorney. She's a retired attorney now. And so, I mean, very similar, like mompreneur, type A personalities. Dad basically was a shift worker, so all of those issues. We grew up on, on sale Kraft macaroni and cheese and hot dogs and comfort food. And I'm one of 6 kids. So they didn't have a lot of money at the beginning, and it was whatever they could do to like feed an army. And luckily we found, lifestyle medicine, and we found this. And as a family, we all adopted it, despite my mom wishing my dad opened a bakery instead of a lifestyle medicine practice. But dad's been teaching us.
Was it gluten-free?
Yeah, right. Vegan. But, so very interesting that, he didn't tell me there was a study around it. He just said, if you're going to take a nap and have coffee, then take a nap. We've all been adopting it for years. And that's one of my mommy secrets.
Yeah, that's something my brother-in-law went into medical school, and I sent him this. I said, like, look, if there's one thing I can help you, there's 2 skills to really learn when you're going through any type of medical school. Number 1 is coffee before nap. Number 2 is learn how to smile and grind your teeth at the same time.
Yeah.
So for those of you who've not been in graduate school, I just think about it. For those of you who've been in grad school, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh. Let me ask you though, Dr. Shea. So before you came up with this 10 pillars of health, and I'm thinking about my dad when he started with lifestyle medicine, before he came up with, the way that he works with patients. It's a little bit feeling like you're throwing spaghetti against a wall and seeing what sticks, because sometimes a patient walks in and, you just decide to have the breakfast talk with her that day, when really maybe, you needed to start with bowels. You talk about bedtime, but you haven't talked about, exercise yet. And so you're going all out of order. Is that sparked you to come up with a framework? What was it like before you had a framework?
So before, I had a framework, basically I would just be data dumping on people. And this, by the way, this presentation, if people want, I gave a full hour presentation on how to make a framework. And there's actually 6 types of frameworks. Geometry, numerical, alliteration, colors, etc. Like there's an entire system to develop frameworks, and that's available on myframeworker.com. You can watch the presentation, download the presentation as a PDF.
It was a great presentation. I'm going to link it to the show notes, and I'm sending it to friends, and I highly encourage everyone to go and watch Dr. Shea with his framework. I mean, it's so many notes. I'm going to refer back to this. I hope you never take it down, and it will.
That's going to stay up.
It'll
be fine. Unless Lead Pages, somehow exits the scene, it'll stay up.
It was so good. And something I'm going to listen to a few times and really take some notes on. So I think that this could help absolutely everyone. I mean, I can think of it applying to my dental clients, my chiropractic clients, my nutrition clients, my nurse practitioners. Yeah. I think this is huge, absolutely huge. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And the framework is like, why have a framework is because if you don't, ultimately, why are we doing this is to help other people and alleviate suffering. And without a framework, it becomes wildly inefficient to accomplish both of those goals, helping people and alleviate suffering. And if from a business standpoint, you can also then take your framework and trademark it, package it, make your products, your services, your books, your programs, whatever. I mean, Stephen Covey, like he's just one of the best he's one of the historically most famous frameworkers out there with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And frameworking is, there's frameworking, there is a skill set to it, that it is learnable. For some people like me, it's just instinctual. It's something that's, to use Dan Sullivan parlance, is a unique ability of mine. And one of the things I've tried to do with this presentation is to, here's how I think of things. I've broken down what's instinctual to me into a structure. Break down what's instinctual into a structure. Hey, that's a framework. Okay. All right. Having a framework will free your time as an entrepreneur, because now, one, marketing becomes a lot easier, because then people can look at your framework and know what you're teaching, and then they can resonate with it. Now, the trick about a framework is cultivating your framework specific to your ideal client, so that the framework itself is not only attractive to your ideal client, but intuitive to them, that they can learn the things you're trying to help your ideal client accomplish. And the big mistake people make when it comes to frameworks is that they jump the gun to create the framework without first identifying their ideal client. And that's a huge mistake if they put the cart before the horse. I mean, there's so many different frameworks. Like there's so many different types. Like the one you see on the right, this Chinese medicine chart, I created that, and that's like the #1 image on Google when you search Dr. Tan's balance method. I mean, it follows between #1 and #3, number 2, 3 in the world. But that is a framework for this little niche audience of specific acupuncturists. Like I've seen this printed out on people's walls in acupuncture clinics. And if you know anything about Chinese medicine, the more you study this chart, the more like, oh my God, like that's like 1,000 years of philosophy on one page, And so it's, you've got all sorts of frameworks that are there to help make people understand what you're trying to do. And
do you know, from a marketing perspective, I mean, so I think I like what you're saying, because once you know who you're giving a framework to, you can't make a framework without knowing who you can give it to. Just like you can't read lab results or a genetic test without knowing who the patient is. It makes a huge difference. You can't do these things in a vacuum. So I think a lot of my providers understand that when it comes to what they're doing in their practice, but the same thing works for marketing. You can't do this without knowing who your target audience is. But I also think that a framework is going to come before any other marketing collateral that you create. It's going to make your website way more streamlined. It's going to make your outreach to other providers. It's going to make your brochures collateral, your in-office sales aids. Everything will fall into place if you have a framework.
Also, it'll make explaining very, very complicated lab stuff so much simpler. I'm pulling up this slide particularly. The fourth type of framework is called clustering. Now, genetics is like, I literally just published my ebook on genetics this week, called it'll be on my website, called You're Missing Genes. And part of the problem with genetics is people are chasing after individual genes as opposed to looking
Please
at the
don't do
systems of it.
that. Right.
And if there's a way, I'm not going to sit here and talk to a client about interleukin 1A-1, interleukin 1-beta, and its correspondence with C-reactive protein 1, 2, 3, and of course the interleukin 10s. You can't ever forget about those. It's so overwhelming for them. So instead, it's just clustering. You can cluster. These are the initiators, these are the propagators, and these are the extinguishers. And you have unfortunately gene variants that prevent you from that. You over initiate inflammation, you over propagate it, and you have trouble putting it out. Done. That's the conversation about inflammation and genetics. You don't need to go into any of these nuances of the A being switched with the T being switched with the G. None of that stuff.
That's not what the patient just wants to know. What do I eat? How do I exercise? Do I need to prioritize sleep or stress? And why is my belly fat? That's what they want to know.
And they also want to know, am I not crazy? Why is this happening to me? And I was like, oh, it's because you overinflame, and here's the genetics to prove it. And then here's what we're going to do about it. Right. I think one of the main things, one of the main benefits of doing functional testing is to show the client, this is real. You're not making this up. Here's exactly the pathways that chart to what your subjective experience, and also the pathways show us what we can do nutritionally and lifestyle-wise in a much more targeted, specific way to help you get better and feel better as quickly as possible.
Well, Dr. Shea, Stanford University did a study that showed that when people were presented with a diet versus a diet with their genetic propensity, that they were way more compliant with the diet paired with their genes. It was like, well, now I know. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I just think that goes to show. Let me ask you a question, because you have both, whether it's, talking about framework and then providers who might want you to hire you, which I highly recommend. I mean, finding someone like you who's an expert in frameworks that you can outsource. You already said that in this podcast, and that's the crux of what I do. Is I tell people to find an expert and have them help you. So I'm so happy to have found you, and now I can refer to you in my Rolodex for that. But also when it comes to, your 10 pillars of health, and if people want to get involved with, you as a provider, it all leads to booking a discovery call. There is no pricing. There's your framework. There's the results you're going to give. But, when it comes to enrolling in the program or not, nothing's really there. And I've seen a lot of other providers that their menu of services looks like a Cheesecake Factory menu. Like it's pages and pages, and we just get decision fatigue. And then you're trying to find, it's almost like when you go to the movie theaters, and there's the small, popcorn, there's the medium, like a little bit of a bigger popcorn, and then there's the popcorn and 2 sodas, and you don't even want to drink the sodas, but it's a better deal because it's only a quarter more than the medium. And so, I mean, and that's what happens is you're trying to find the best value. And so sometimes you just end up doing nothing. So I like that because I teach this too, is no one's going to click on and buy a $297 phone call or a package or a VIP sessions just from clicking on things. I like that you have a book, a discovery call. But tell me, from a practicality standpoint, what are the pros and cons of the discovery call?
Sure. So the first concept of a discovery call really came back in 2010, or very early, when my sister called me up and introduced me to this author called Tim Ferriss. And she said, "You'll love his book. You remind me of him." And I'm like, and now it sounds a bit arrogant for me to make that thing. This is 10 years ago before Tim got super famous. But it's like, he's like, "You guys think so outside the box. Like, you love his work." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And when I'm reading his book, he talked about how if people price things under $200 if you don't want to talk to people, in the sense, like, if you can sell things for under $200 and people don't need a phone call. If you're selling something for over $200, you really have to have some sort of system of questioning, fielding questions. So if you're going to be pricing a discovery, so the point of a discovery call is for people to connect with you as a provider to see if you're the right fit. I mean, it's not just like, "Hi, I'm calling up a mechanic." They're talking about their health, which is wrapped up emotionally, their family, they're thinking about their future. They're concerned about embarrassment that they picked the wrong provider. They're worried about finances. There's all sorts of other emotional layers are mixed into, calling you as a healthcare provider versus just a mechanic. And the the discovery, ideally, if someone's going to be booking a discovery call, they have already heard you on a podcast or two, watched a YouTube video or 10, scoured through your blogs, read an ebook, so they already actually know you. When people right now get onto a discovery call with me, and this took years to build up, they've already seen, at least a couple, read collectively an hour or two or more of my content. And what they're doing is they're calling to do a gut check. Am I the same person on the phone, or rather on
Zoom.
on Google Meet,
Yeah.
that I am in the videos, on the podcast, and whatever? And they also have some specific questions that, "Can you help me with my specific thing? Have you done that before? How long will this take? What is the investment?" And so on. So the discovery call itself, if you have enough online collateral, YouTube channel, YouTube videos, doing podcasts, writing, whatever it may be, the discovery calls become easier and easier because more and more people are self-filtered. And if you're in the very, very beginning, and if you don't even know your niche yet, which is where we all are, usually you don't find out your true niche until about 5 years in, like, truly, because you learn what you're good at. If you want to know your niche, who do you love serving? Like, for example, who are you excited to work with, gives you energy as opposed to drains you when you work with them, who gets better from your recommendations and analysis, who happily does them, happily and gratefully pays you, and happily and gratefully refers you equally awesome fitting people for your practice. That's kind of everything coming together. And it takes about 5 years to really figure that all out, and some really harsh lessons. But in the meantime, in the very beginning, like, you should be taking the discovery calls for a lot of things, because it's called a practice. You're still figuring it all out. I'm at the point, the benefits of the discovery call is to figure out, can you actually help this person or not? Or do you feel like that you can, assuming you have mentors, which you should, to help you figure stuff out if things get hairy, which it will. And the benefit of the discovery call is really getting out there and being able to see if you can help cases. The downfall of discovery calls is you can come across a lot of non-committal tire kickers who are also trying to suck advice from you for free. And if the discovery calls can be a time vacuum. And I'm literally in transition, as of November this year, to now paid discovery calls, where people are going to be paying me. At this point, it's $97 for 15 minutes to talk with me on a discovery call. Starting in November. And the reason why I'm doing that is, one, my schedule is getting busier and busier. So I have due to increased demand, I can justify that. The other is that I've just had enough experiences of non-committal advice grabbing tire kickers that I feel like my time is not being valued. Additionally, there is a reality that in certain medical cultural environments, like, you're a doctor. Why am like, you just call in and schedule an appointment and you go in and you pay for the appointment, even the initial, like, why are you having an initial thing? It seems kind of gimmicky. So there's certain people that have that perception of, why are you giving away a chatting session to a doctor for free? Shouldn't I be paying? Like, that doesn't make sense to a certain meaningful section of the population. So there's that argument to have a paid discovery call. And just like in, certain social media ecosystems, if there's a paywall, you keep out most of the trolls. And I'm not saying every people who go to my discovery calls are trolled, not at all, but it's the tire kicker analogy. Like, you weed out a huge number of non-committals, or people just trying to squeeze you for free advice. And and I have no problem with free advice. That's what my YouTube channel is for.
Oh my gosh, you have so
You
much.
know,
The other
and
thing,
my
I mean,
podcast is for. No, not
let's
my
see
podcast. The
too.
podcast I've been
Right,
on.
right. Your podcast that you're on.
Yeah.
There's also like, yeah, I always like to see what the aesthetics industry is doing in the personal care industry.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I book a massage, it's if I don't show up, I still pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you have to prepay for services. If people aren't on this call, on the who are listening to this, aren't where you are, Dr. Shea, where they feel like they could go ahead and charge for that. You also, I've seen the discovery call is $97, and at the end of it, it gets applied towards
Yeah,
whatever
credit. Yeah,
program
absolutely.
too.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways. Let me ask you if you think this would work. Do you think that you could get to a place, especially because you have a framework, and you could teach that framework to a team of people? Could you have a health coach, a medical assistant, a physician extender in some way conduct discovery calls?
Of course. And so there's even, I mean, I even know, a practitioner that the clients don't even talk to him until they talk to his medical, like his medical assistant, where they go over, here are the functional labs you have to run before meeting with the doctor. So it's like before, and they pay $400 for that consult, before it even sees, the functional medicine practitioner. So there's many different ways of doing it, of having a medical assistant or health coach or whatever do the initial filtering. My MO is, I put out as much free education as I can, so they know who I am, who my mana, my affect. My personality jives really well with certain people. Like I said, moms, entrepreneurs, lawyers, engineers, software developers, high-end service providers like accountants, and ex-military. Like, we get along great, but there's certain personality types that I don't get along with. The hyper, the hyper effusive theatrical types, who are interested in the drama of it all and not the practicality of it. Those people, there's not a resonant match. And there's also people, I also screen for victim types. I listen very carefully to how they're talking and how they write. If it's blame, 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 then I know that I eventually will be on that, postmortem list of people, because when I see someone just talk about blaming others, I know that the moment they don't feel that they're improving at the rate they feel they should, and you can hear the edge with the word I say feel, like just how subjective and arbitrary, their mood is. It's like they're going to then turn at me and start. I've had some pretty harrowing experiences of, if you're in practice long enough, you'll come across the absolute malignant narcissist who will run you around in circles and do everything impossible to act like Wimpy from Popeye and say, I'll pay you on Tuesday. And then the moment you actually give them the bill, oh my God, do they Jekyll and become just I've lost sleep over one particular client who had the misfortune of realizing he was one of the 3 known vexatious litigants in New Zealand, where and then I figured out afterwards in talking to other like people and lawyers, like, oh yeah, this guy does this thing to all the providers. So you're just
Sometimes it's
now.
just worth it too, just like, blessing and releasing it and
Exactly.
just moving on.
Well,
And I
that's
think
what I
that's
did.
so important.
Take the $5,000 lesson, be grateful it wasn't another
Oh,
decimal point more, and move on. I
that's
mean, the
it.
one lawyer told me, he says, okay, let's assume you sue him for all the services that you provided that he agreed to pay, but is now refusing to because he is who he is. What is going to be better for you and your business? Devoting all that energy we would to fighting with him, assuming you can even collect, or just going and finding a new set of patients?
Oh,
And I said, wow, thank you. They've just made my life infinitely
and
easier.
that's a whole nother podcast too. I mean,
Yeah.
I interviewed an attorney on how to even, she's a malpractice attorney on how to even, it's coming out soon, this podcast, but on how to even avoid malpractice,
I can tell you that
and
right
so.
now. Be likable. Be likable. The people sue clinicians that they don't like. And the number, when I was in legal class in chiropractic school, they said that the things that drive people to sue clinicians is that they don't like you, and you as a clinician cut off communication or are rude, and then it becomes this personal thing.
Yeah.
And like, I've had people that have cheated me out of stuff, but I like them, so I was like, just like was not, you know, I was like, I kind of made this calculus, but I had this one person I did sue for outright stealing from me, and she just jeckled on me, and I was like, okay, it's personal now, and being likable is and I'm not trying to be contrived in your likability. Like, it's actually a clinical imperative to be likable, because
Bedside manner. Like
sitting
bedside manner. That's what they call it, too. And having a good bedside manner.
it's actually goes even deeper than that. My first bachelor's degree was in psychosomatic medicine. And so, studying the placebo effect, the single most studied effect in all of medicine, in the history of all studies of medicine, is the placebo effect. And there was this article that came out, I believe it was in the New York Times in January of 2019. And it talked about, basically, obviously I'm distilling an article down to like a soundbite, but it's like, how much the placebo effect is how much you like and trust your doctor. Now, when I read that, suddenly everything made sense, because I have met some profoundly mediocre clinicians who get exponentially higher level results than they should.
Yeah.
Why? They're so damn likable.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
so likable. And so, but and the inverse is that I've met genius clinicians whose protocols like glow, just glow, and they do not get the results they should because they have a personality of a doorstop. And it makes total sense now after I read that article. If you don't like and or trust your doctor, every time, or a clinician or whoever you work with, every time you think of them, think of a protocol, think of a diet, think of a supplement, think of whatever they asked you to do, you're going to have a cortisol response.
Oh,
So you're
yes.
going to have this cortisol glass ceiling above you in terms of your ability to progress, no matter how good the protocols are. Now, the height of the ceiling may vary based on how good the protocols are, but there's still going to be a cortisol ceiling somewhere. And if you really like and trust your clinician, you don't have that glass ceiling. So you can really go way beyond whatever the inputs are of the lifestyle just on its own.
Right.
So when I read that study, that's when I said, wow, okay, it's a clinical imperative for the client's benefit to be more likable. And just to put a fine point on it, I met Dr. Wilson, the doctor who wrote Adrenal Fatigue back in 1999. He's very grandfatherly. He's a very kind man. He's an amazing man. He's got 3 masters and 2 PhDs, all from 5 separate institutions, which I think there's only like a half dozen people in the world who have done that. Anyway, I told him about the struggles I was having in practice, and he pulled me aside, and this is real vulnerable here. He said, there's 3 things that patients look for in their doctor: availability, likability, capability. You've got the first and third bit. You need to work on the second bit.
Oh.
Yeah, that was bitter medicine to swallow. And he was right. And so then a couple years later, I read this article and I was like, okay, I need to restart stand-up comedy training. just to be lighter and be thinking about humor, not to do knock knock jokes or some nonsense, but just to think about, like, how is this situation funny? And if, one of the best things I can do for a client, aside from delivering, if I'm in a lab consult and there's some pretty serious stuff on the labs, if I can use analogies that they're laughing half the time while I'm reading them their reports about just how serious it is, like, I've done an excellent job, because now it's like, okay, this is winnable. Like, this.
Dr. Shea playing on that cortisol response there.
Exactly.
I mean, you know too much about hormones, but just to bring it full circle too, I think when you have a framework in your practice, and if your strength isn't likability, or you're a mompreneur provider who wants to scale, but also wants to watch our kids grow up, or you're someone who wants to retire someday, but still leave a legacy. I think the framework it plays into that, because there's going to be times where maybe it's not that you're not the most likable provider, but that's just not where you want to be, is in the clinic. And I love the idea of the freedom of a framework, giving, a provider legacy, giving a provider in a way that you can, really in big business, what I learned from, Robert Kiyosaki and his Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Cash Flow Quadrant. When you work in your practice, you're still on the left side of the quadrant as a small business owner. But when you create a framework, something that's duplicatable, something you can own without working in there, now we're big B, we're on the right side of the quadrant and we have some leverage. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that have just connected a lot of dots. And so just tell me, like, who are your ideal practitioners to go to myframeworker.com to book a discovery call with you, to watch your hour lecture, and how simple of a process, how long does it take? What do we need to know about it?
The main things are this: like, if getting your own framework, you are ready for a framework, not when you just start out and you don't know who your ideal client is, not and it's, even if you do know your ideal client, do you have a system, no matter how loose? Like, having a system is not the same thing as a framework. A framework is an organization of systems. So if you have, I can best serve people who know their ideal client. And if you don't, I can walk you through a process on how to
Come hang
identify
with
it.
me for a month.
Yeah,
So
there's plenty of people who do ideal client work. I'm good at it, but my real genius is in the framework side of it. So however you can figure out your ideal client, if you know your ideal client and you know the tools and the recommendations and a rough order of what you do with your clients, but it's not in a clean, systematized, easy to understand infographic, like, it's just not there on paper as a one-page, boom, here it is. That's the person that I can most help. And it doesn't have to be just in health. I've done this for a singer. I've done this for martial artists. I've done this for a psychologist who was organizing. I mean, she was all over the place with family therapy systems and like 10 different modalities. I've done this for different swaths of people, because frameworking is a unique ability. It's not specific to the healthcare. It's just healthcare is the one I'm most familiar with and applying it. If people are the other reason people would want to get a framework, aside from knowing ideal client and having like an understanding of what their systems are that need to be stitched together into a single visual, is if you are wanting to write your books, make an online course, what your 5 steps to this, your seven blocks of that, the invertent hypotenuse of whatever, like whatever, whatever things you're wanting to create. Because like, my 10 pillars of health, that's 10 Kindle books right there.
Right.
That's
Or
10 Kindle.
lecture series, or
Exactly.
10 YouTube videos. I mean, you're so right that everything can come off of that. I hope everyone here watches your webinar on myframeworker.com, take some notes, and, reach out to Dr. Shea to see if it's a fit. I really love that you do that. You offer, a little first bite, glass of wine, cup of coffee.
Oh, God, yeah.
Let's see if you guys can work together. Dr. Shea, I feel like you and I have not wrapped up this conversation. We're going to continue on the interwebs in times to come, because I see your business even evolving and growing and expanding. And I just absolutely love all the ideas. This has been total gold. Please go follow all the show notes everywhere we're linking. Dr. Shea, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And I have my eldest sister's name's Sarah, so you get an extra gold star for.
Whoop, whoop, where the princess is. That's what it means.
Exactly. And I really enjoy talking about this, because talking about business is something I really love doing. And most of the podcasts I'm on are clinical in nature. And my view of, the opening gambit of that myframeworker.com video is I talk about celebrating entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are the people that drive the culture, society, and science forward. And sadly, we're the ones that are most spat on. Like 90% of all villains in movies and television shows are business people, which is to me just crazy. And people listening to this who are entrepreneurs, you are the heroes in my book. And my service to you is to be able to give you something to bring your gift, whatever it is you're trying to improve in the world, make it so much easier for you and your ideal clients. And that's how I wish to serve the business community, is through frameworking. And when it's all done and you have your framework in front of you, and then suddenly all the doors of possibility open, whatever your preferred style of sharing your information, suddenly you have a launch pad. And then the world can really change, and your world can change from a business and freedom perspective.
You could change so many other people's worlds. So
exactly.
Gonna leave you with that. Thank you so much. We'll chat soon.
Sarah.
Thanks so much for listening. I want to hang out with you more. I truly believe your success is related to the people you spend the most time with. That's why I created the free community, the Girlfriends Group of Health Practitioners. It's a safe space for you to connect with other soul practitioners who don't just want to keep the doors of their practice open, but they want to impact the health of their community. Head over to www.sarah2gender.com and hit the tab at the top that says Group. Go in there and introduce yourself today. I'll see you soon.